Good morning. Welcome back to another episode of HardFoul Radio. This is the show that values time. I value mine. You should value yours. So let's get started. We are continuing with Division Week here. Wonderful time. Can't wait for football season. The crackhead in me is just feeling some kind of way. So it is Wednesday. Nobody likes Wednesday. So I felt what better time than to pick what I think will be the two worst divisions in football. Ironically, both are the South, the AFC and NFC South. Now, the way I wanted to start this week off was essentially giving a theme to each division, right? Because I think if you look around and you see the four teams that make up each division, there's a theme going into this year that you can kind of encapsulate the entire division around. And that's true with these two as well. They may not be really strong themes because, like I said, these two divisions, these teams, not so great. So let's start with the AFC South. The AFC South, we're starting on a positive note, is the division of optimism. Look at the amount of young quarterbacks in this division alone. CJ Stroud, who's going to be starting the number 2 overall pick for the Texans. Anthony Richardson, another top 5 pick. 2 rookie QBs are going to be starting week 1 inside one division. And the Titans, even though Ryan Tannehill is the starter, have Malik Willis, and they just drafted the new kid. So, there is multiple young quarterbacks in one division. And the team that most people believe will win the division is the next young superstar in Trevor Lawrence. There's a lot of optimism here. Now, I think this division as a whole, it's not very good. I think it's clearly the weakest division in the AFC. But even, I've said this multiple times, if you're not going to be good, at least be exciting. There's nothing that a fan base hates more than when their team not only sucks, but they're boring and they got nothing to look forward to. I've been a Bronco fan the last 7 years. It's been a lot of boring. It's not even a matter of the record. It's more so the fact of the games on Sunday, they're boring. There's not a lot to look forward to because they're just competitive enough to not get a crazy high draft pick, but they're boring to watch on offense. It ruins your Sunday, and it spills in other parts in your life, and it just makes you miserable as a human being because we're sports fans and we're all just crazy and irrational. So when your football team sucks on a Sunday and they're boring on top of it, it ruins your whole day. So you can be bad, but don't be boring. Be the bad team that has a great young offense that can score 25, 30 points, and the defense isn't just quite there. Or maybe you don't have the right head coach. And there's going to be a lot of that here in the AFC South. The Jaguars are going to be exciting. Trevor Lawrence, Calvin Ridley. People are already talking about that, even though they've never played a snap together, as a potential top 5 connection just due to the high upsides and ceilings of both players. That's fun. That's exciting. That's something to look up. That's something to look forward to. That's optimism. We love optimism. As human beings, we love optimism. And as sports fans, we especially love optimism. Let me be excited for something. The Titans, yes, you might not have the quote-unquote same kind of feeling immediately because Tannehill is going to be your week 1 starter, but the potential between your last 2 drafts, putting draft capital and relevant draft capital into 2 quarterbacks, knowing that, okay, if we get off to a slow start, the reins are going to be handed over. It's a lot to look forward to. Plus, you get Derrick Henry back, what should be a fully healthy season. And we all love watching Derrick Henry play. The Texans, you just got your potential future of your franchise. CJ Stroud, plus you just got the Texans went and used multiple draft picks that they got to capitalize off the Deshaun Watson trade, and they got multiple top 5 picks. So this is potential not only to have your quarterback of the future, you've got potentially 3 or 4 guys this year as rookies who not potentially, but for sure are going to play big-time minutes, big-time roles, and the potential and optimism comes for how good and how great can they potentially be and at how fast a rate and how fast a pace can they get there. So, once again, there's not going to be a lot of good that comes out of this division in terms of you're not looking for a team to get off to 12, 13 wins, compete for the 1 seed. I know there's a lot of talk right now that the Jaguars are the sneaky 1-seed favorite because they're going to beat up on the bad division and they're potentially going to get to those 12, 13 wins. I don't see that happening, but the optimism is crazy. And then the Colts with Anthony Richardson, the biggest upside prospect of any first-round quarterback in the last several years. Like, if you just look at his numbers across the board, his physical numbers, how fast he can run, arm strength, the way he did the drills, he killed the combine. Like, his upside is more than any other quarterback that was drafted this year and realistically last year. Now, we know he's a very raw project, so he's probably going to come out the gate the slowest. But I'm a big believer, especially in the AFC, you're going to need special when it's time for you to compete. Because Mahomes is special. Burrow is special. Allen is special. So when it comes to these are the guys that are in your way, these are the guys you got to knock off if you want to have true aspirations of a championship or being a competitive playoff team year in, year out, you're going to need special. And Anthony Richardson, out of all the quarterbacks taken this year and even last year, and you could even argue going into next year with the exception of Caleb Williams, his upside is that great. So if you're the Colts, you have the most, and I know it's been a crappy offseason with the Jonathan Taylor stuff, but even with the Jonathan Taylor stuff aside, you have the potential to be, you have the most exciting young quarterback in the NFL if he pans out. So the AFC South's theme is optimism. Not going to be great. Worst division in the AFC. But the optimism. Lawrence, the Titans' future, C.J. Stroud, Anthony Richardson. This is the worst division in the AFC and potentially the NFL this year. All these guys pan out, that will not be the case in 2 years. Matter of fact, all these guys pan out, this is potentially the best division in the AFC in 2 years. Transitioning from the AFC South to the NFC South, and this is the bummer part of the show. This is where, the optimism starts to go out the window, It's the first of the month, the rent's due again. This is the time nobody wants to be a part of. The NFC South is the worst division in football. And there's not a lot of optimism. There's not a lot of excitement. This is bad, getting worse, and it's going nowhere fast. Like, what is the most promising thing in the NFC South? Like, think about that for a second. Just really ask yourself, what's the most promising thing? Derek Carr on his veteran quarterback part of his career, entering the journeyman part of his career. Derek Carr reuniting with Dennis Allen, like that's not exciting. That's watching Fast 10. Like we've seen this movie before. Although all you people watch fucking Fast 10, so what do I know? The Panthers, yeah, you've got Bryce Young, but like we've seen the Panthers, they're similar to the team I root for in the Broncos in terms of we've had this revolving door the last several years. They tried Teddy Bridgewater, they tried Sam Darnold, they've tried, it's like it kind of feels like, and Bryce Young is the smallest of all the first round quarterbacks. I understand he still went first overall, but he's still the smallest. I would argue, and it's maybe the controversial part of the show, is like he's got the least upside out of all the quarterbacks taken. He doesn't flash off the TV where like that same excitement factor that someone like Anthony Richardson provides. He's not going to give it to you. He might be more stable and he might be more poised and ready to play week one, but he's not going to give you those same flashes, those same kind of, these are all alpha males playing in the NFL. These guys know who can play. These guys know who are the big time athletes who can stand out on a field with other big time athletes. And Bryce Young doesn't exactly. It's the Tua factor. It's like they're just not big enough to really give you that flash. Not saying he won't succeed. Not saying he can't be a good NFL quarterback or even potentially a great NFL quarterback. But it's not there off the rip. The Buccaneers are essentially, when we talked about the Rams yesterday, you put all your chips in the middle of the table. You got Tom Brady. You re-signed your Super Bowl team. You got a Super Bowl out of it. Now it's time to pay the bill, and there's a lot of bills due, and your credit cards are maxed out, and a lot going on here. Like you got to pay these bills. credit card's not there no more. It's going to go downhill real fast. This is why you signed a Baker Mayfield. This is why him and Kyle like I know Baker won the starting quarterback job, but when your competition is Kyle Trask and they've both looked terrible in preseason and they both look terrible in practice, not this you got your Super Bowl, you got your couple years of Tom Brady. Now, this is the turnaround that almost all franchises have to deal with when they lose their all-time great quarterback, even though Brady was obviously only there for a couple years, not a career worth. So, similar situation to the Rams. It's not going to be pretty. And the Falcons, who are, I think, just the surprise Caleb Williams team. Like, I think that's something that we're going to break that down after the break. In terms of, I think they're surprisingly going to be a team that is in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes, but Desmond Ridder, same thing with Bryce Young, doesn't exactly jump off the page, and he's not the first overall pick. He's not the decorated collegiate athlete. He just feels like a placeholder, even though he's a younger quarterback who was just drafted last year. There is the NFC South feels like today. It feels like Wednesday. It feels like the day nobody wants to be a part of, because it's not the beginning of the week where we can all bitch about it being Monday together, and it's not Friday where we're all looking forward to the weekends. It just feels like Wednesday. It feels like hump day. The entire NFC South feels like fucking Wednesday. Now that the depressing part of the show is over, a lot more to talk about. We're going to break down each individual team, their biggest storyline heading into the season. This is HardFoul Radio. We'll be back momentarily.
Yeah. Spence. Nigga, where am I going? Drop the four with my cup, now I'm floating. I can't feel a thing, to be real, I just go through the motions. Where am I going? Nigga, I'm in deep like the ocean. I've been in my bag, everybody around me, I'm ghosting. Where am I going? Drop the four with my cup, now I'm floating. I can't feel a thing, to be real, I just go through the motions. Where am I going? Nigga, I'm in deep like the ocean. I've been in my bag, everybody around me, I'm ghosting. Where am I going? I don't know.
And we are back. This is HardFoul Radio. Appreciate you guys for joining me on this wonderful Wednesday. We are breaking down the AFC South and the NFC South, but we're starting here with the AFC South. What's going to make or break these teams throughout this season? Remember, we start as we go in order as the divisions were last year. You first place, we talk about your first. Last place, you get talked about last. That's how it goes. So let's start with the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is a Trevor Lawrence story, and it's only the Trevor Lawrence story. Trevor Lawrence, I've heard a lot of media members discuss as Peyton Manning 2.0 has become a very common term for him, and that is due to the extremely high remarks in high school, the extremely high remarks in college, and we all kind of give him a pass for that first season with Urban Meyer. It was a shit show, and then the playoff game, even though he threw several interceptions in the first half, even though he was down 28-0, even though has not had a Pro Bowl level season, we think he's great. And I think Trevor Lawrence is good. And I think he is arguably really good, but I haven't quite put enough to say he's in that class yet. But he's definitely not in the great class. I discussed yesterday in regards to Herbert, who I feel got elevated to the Mahomes, Allen, and Burrow status when he really shouldn't be. He's more in the Lamar category in terms of great young quarterbacks and Hurts. There's no reason, and I've seen multiple people that have put Trevor Lawrence as a potential top 5 quarterback this year. There's no reason to realistically think that outside of being a fan. And sometimes in sports we do this. We actually do this a lot in sports, which is a really good guy surrounded by really bad or incompetent looks great from a distance. In the NBA, we have this all the time. A guy who scores 20 to 25 points on a bad team, and then he gets traded to a good team, and he is essentially null and void and non-factor in the playoffs because he was used to teams not really caring, not playing that attentive because the team he was on wasn't that good. They could give up the 20, 25 points, and it never made a true impact in the game. We've seen those all throughout NBA history. In the NFL, we're very skewed, and this is why you just can't make comparisons to guys like Tom Brady, to guys like Peyton Manning, because they dominated bad divisions most of their career. They were all-time great players. Tom Brady, the greatest ever seen, and Peyton Manning, arguably the second greatest quarterback we've ever seen. They would have dominated any division. But they did look even greater when they were beating up on their really crappy divisions for the majority of their career. I think Trevor Lawrence is good to really good, and I think he is going to get confused as great as he is beating up a much lesser division with the Titans and Texans, and the Colts. And realistically, I said this as the optimism division. What is Trevor Lawrence going to look like in 2 years? That's going to be the real judge of how great he is. If we if we think he's going to get to great or really great status. Because it's going to be fine for this year, most likely. The fact that he's going to be able to beat up on an older Ryan Tannehill, or if the Titans get off to a slow start, one of their young quarterbacks. He's probably going to be able to beat up on a C.J. Stroud in the Texans. He's probably going to be able to beat up on an Anthony Richardson in the Colts. But what happens in a couple years if Anthony Richardson does pan out? And Anthony Richardson has a stronger arm than him. Anthony Richardson is a bigger athlete than him. Now, the accuracy Trevor has right now, but Anthony Richardson absolutely has the potential to be a more explosive player in the NFL. What happens if C.J. Stroud and these top 5 picks that the Texans have, which they will potentially have even more, depending on how you feel about the Browns situation, because they still have picks that are coming from the Deshaun Watson trade. Where is Trevor Lawrence? There's no way to accurately describe how good he is right now. We just think he's going to be great because he's been elevated due to the fact that he's playing around a bunch of crap. He has been a good player on a crappy Jaguars team, and he's going to look better because he's playing in a crappy division. But let's see where he's at in 2 years. But the Jaguars story is solely a Trevor Lawrence story. The Tennessee Titans are one of those teams. I put my Broncos in the same conversation of we all believe in Mike Vrabel. I have no idea what the Titans are going to look like this season. I think there's potential to go either way, but Mike Vrabel is going to figure it out. Now, whether everybody that's on this roster is going to be a part of the figuring out, that's a whole other story. Mike Vrabel is a really good coach. He knows what he wants his team to look like. He's got a system in place. He's going to turn this around. Derrick Henry is probably in the last. This is, if he has another great year in him, this is probably his last or second to last great year of being potentially the best running back in football. They obviously traded away A.J. Brown. They did just sign DeAndre Hopkins, which feels like they've seen the meme or the joke of all the great receivers that, go to end their career in Tennessee. Andre Johnson, Randy Moss. So that doesn't look great for DeAndre. Tannehill, I think there's still something there, but he is clearly in the bridge quarterback phase of his career. They're trying to hand this team over to either Will Levis or Malik Willis, depending on who they feel like is. I know there was reports they gave up on Malik Willis earlier in the season or earlier in the offseason, but that looks contradictory to how much playing time they gave him in the preseason. So Ryan Tannehill's a bridge quarterback. But the Titans are the most solid bet in this division to know how they're going to look like, which is they're going to be a running team. They're going to be physical. They're going to be well coached. They're going to be in damn near every game they're in unless they're totally just out-talented by one of the top teams. And I feel the best about them looking the same week in, week out than I do any team in this division. The Colts, they finished third last year. The Anthony Richardson show. We got to see what we got here. Now, it was, for whatever reason, a controversial topic when they announced that he was going to be starting week 1. And I thought this was weird. People were like, oh, how can you throw him out there week 1? He's so raw. He's not ready. They're going to end up, screwing with his development, et cetera, et cetera. But these same people were had this same kind of scenario of young, raw quarterback. Why aren't they getting him out there? Oh, now they've traded him. Yes, I absolutely believe Anthony Richardson should start week 1 because otherwise he turns into Trey Lance. We all know what's going on with Trey Lance, and it's the way the NFL does business now. Everything is essentially in these 2-year microwaves, and you either got to make it or break it. Trey Lance sat for a year. The Niners said, let's do it. He got hurt, and that was it. So if Anthony Richardson were to sit for a year, let's say he comes out, he's an athletic quarterback, he's going to be moving around, he's much more likely to get hit. What if he comes out, he gets hurt, and the Colts go, okay, we're moving on. And don't say it's impossible. Don't act like Jim Irsay, and we've all seen how rational he is, like he won't pull the plug. And they didn't even trade 3 first-round picks. The Niners traded 3 picks to get Trey Lance out there, just have him play a game and a half, the one game in a monsoon, and then go, okay, get out the building. Because they drafted Trey Lance, burning bridges with Jimmy Garoppolo and essentially trying to lock him out of the building. So this Anthony Richardson needs to play. I don't want to hear like, oh, he's too raw, he's not ready, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. Anthony Richardson needs to play football. The Colts need him to play as much as he can. You start him week 1. You find out what he can do. The NFL is essentially a 2-year business. Now, apologize. Colts just brought a new head coach. So you should have some leeway with maybe more than 2 years if we think Jim Irsay will suddenly be rational. But, like, get Anthony Richardson out there. Get him reps. You need to find out what you have. Your record doesn't matter. I know to your head coach it'll matter. But if Anthony Richardson shows flashes, and let's say he puts up good numbers, not great, they're losing games, but you can clearly see he's making like a Justin Fields type of example of he is making 4 or 5 plays a game where it's like him and only Justin Fields can make those kind of plays. Anthony Richardson needs to play. End of story. Finally, the Texans. The Texans feel like, and I know I don't think the Texans are going to be good this year. Let me be very clear. I don't think they're going to be very good this year. There's going to be a lot of struggles, a lot of growing pains. But I do really like DeMeco Ryans. And this has a lot of early San Francisco. Draft a quarterback, draft a pass rusher, I believe they ended up with like 10, 11 picks. 5 to 7 of those guys are most likely going to play. They're not going to be very good and play big minutes. Not just play, but they're going to be big-time parts of their rotation players. They are then most likely going to get additional picks. They got additional picks due to the Deshaun Watson trade next year. If the Browns are a shit show, that's potentially multiple top 5 picks again. And this has the potential to be, in a year, one of the more talented rosters in the NFL. Now, this is a slow grind. This is putting your chicken in the rotisserie. This is not a overnight fast food kind of meal, but there's a lot here that I like. But are they going to, quote unquote, trust their process? There's a lot here I like, but it's not going to reflect and it's not going to show this year, this season. But there's a lot. If Stroud works, the pass rusher works, they have another good draft next year. If they're competitive in games, which I believe they can be with DeMeco Ryans and this young talent, this is going to be a really fun team to watch and potentially one of the best rosters in the NFL next year. Now we got to go to the NFC South. Once again, this is the worst division in football, so we're going to be a little bit quicker here because I think these storylines are not nearly as interesting, and to be honest, I don't really want to talk about them. You guys don't really want to hear them, but we got to be fair to every single team, even if we think they're just going to be, I don't know, a stinky pile of dog shit, not very good. So this is the NFC South. And this order is really funny because, like I said, we are basing this order off of how they finished last year. So the Bucs are number 1, you know. By the way, even with Tom Brady in this division, they had a losing record, win the division. Do you know the levels of bad you have to have Tom Brady in your division and a team with a losing record with Tom Brady makes the playoff? Like, anyway, the Buccaneers, what are we doing here? This is going to be a shit show. This is going to be right there with the Cardinals in terms of a essentially tanking football team. Baker Mayfield, who's had, some guys get a lot of chances. Some guys are Josh Rosen. It's just how it goes. And Baker, I don't think this is going to be the comeback season that he thinks it's going to be. I don't think Kyle Trask is any good either. I think the Bucs understand where they are, and they're going to be in, whether they want to admit it or not, the Caleb Williams sweepstakes. And Caleb Williams, notably, put out last week, there's a story that came out, and I absolutely believe they wanted it to be leaked, that he might stay in college because he's got NIL money, and, he's going to clearly be on a really talented USC team. He's going to be a Heisman favorite, and he doesn't really have to risk screwing up his potential as one of the greatest draft picks in history, which most people believe he will be. And if I'm Caleb Williams, or I'm somebody talking to Caleb Williams and I have his ear, I'm in his circle, the Bucs would be a team that I'd be like, yeah, if they have the first pick, don't come out. I think the same thing about the Cardinals. If they had the first pick, don't come out. Because it's going to be such a talentless roster who they not only, in the case of the Cardinals, they're even worse because they've started sending away some of their talented players when they don't have many. The Bucs are just they put all the chips on the table for Tom Brady in the Super Bowl, which they got. Congrats. But now the Bills do. So yeah, that's the Bucs. The Panthers, is Bryce Young the guy? We kind of discussed when we were doing the team overview. You're going to have to find out a lot this year with Bryce Young. He's going to have to play. He's going to have to get hit. He's obviously a smaller quarterback, so that is going to play a role. But you got to find out, what is Bryce Young going to be? What can Bryce Young do? That's when you start a rookie quarterback week 1, your record does not matter. Your season, you're not planning for the playoffs. Is this guy going to be the guy? We got to find out. Saints, you should win the division. I mean, you should. You've got the most competent quarterback. Your head coach is so-so. You've got probably the most top-to-bottom, ready-to-go talent on your roster right now. You've got vets, Lattimore, Cam Jordan, Michael Thomas, if he comes back healthy. You should win the division, but if the Saints made the playoffs, is any team scared to play the Saints? There's always teams don't want to play. Teams don't want to play the Niners. Teams don't want to play the Eagles. There's teams that don't even want to play the Cowboys. And you can have these one-off situations where even if it's not necessarily the best record, there's teams I could totally see that don't want to play. If the Giants were to make the playoffs, they don't want to play the Giants because of the threat Daniel Jones is as a runner, and it's an offense that you're not used to playing against everybody, and they could just catch you off guard for a week, and you get caught off guard one game and you go home. Would anybody be scared to play the Saints? But you should win the division. Shout out to my friend RJ. He's a Saints fan. Hope they do well. I think they should win the division, but I think if they get to the playoffs, no one's going to be scared of them. It's just the truth. Don't worry. My team sucks too. The Falcons, this is the secret Caleb Williams location that I think actually more people should start looking at. You have the Atlanta Black factor, and that's a real thing. It's just the effect and the culture in Atlanta, especially with Black Americans, especially with Black athletes. It's a cooler place to play than if Anthony Richardson, imagine Anthony Richardson hype if he was in Atlanta versus him being in Indianapolis. Two entirely different cities, two entirely different cultures. They'd react differently. There's a reason Mike Vick is a forever NFL icon, and despite the clearly known and very well documented scandal, because he's a black quarterback in Atlanta, and that means something. And they're gonna have Kyle Pitts, and they don't feel like they're just tanking, which is something that Caleb Williams would be going into if he went to either Arizona or the Bucs. They're just not good enough, and especially if you're like me and just don't think Desmond Ridder's good enough, this might be the situation to go to, because they might only win 2 or 3 games, and they'll be in consideration for that number 1 overall pick. Now, obviously, you have to have the number 1 overall pick. 2's not going to get it. Caleb Williams is going 1. There's not a whole lot to talk about there. But this is my secret Caleb Williams team that if he can go there, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, they've got a couple other pieces. This could look really cool. Just saying. we got one last thing to do here. We're going to take a very short break, and then we're going to come give you our actual predictions here on HardFoul Radio for the AFC and NFC South. Don't go away. We'll be back momentarily.
Yeah. Spent. Nigga, where am I going? Drop the four in my cup, now I'm floating. I can't feel a thing, to be real, I just go through the motions. Where am I going? Nigga, I'm in deep like the ocean. I've been in my bag, everybody around me, I'm ghosting. Where am I going? Drop the four in my cup, now I'm floating. I can't feel a thing, to be real, I just go through the motions. Where am I going? Nigga, I'm in deep like the ocean. I've been in my bag, everybody around me, I'm ghosting. Where am I going? I don't know.
And we are here to wrap up our predictions for the AFC and NFC South. Let's start with the AFC South. We are going to go worst to first, add a little bit of that suspense. Worst team in the AFC South, I got the Indianapolis Colts. Now, I think they have like I said, the biggest upside, biggest potential player in Anthony Richardson. I think if he works, he is going to have flashes, and they are going to be must-see TV by the end of the season, similar to the way the Bears were. By must-see TV, I mean they're going to be like the best red zone team because you're not going to want to watch the whole game. You're just going to watch the 5 or 6 plays where he either throws the ball 70 yards downfield or breaks off for a 50-yard touchdown run. But I do think they're going to be the most inconsistent, and I think they have the least amount of talent in that division, and obviously with a rookie head coach. There's a lot to like here if you're a Colts fan down the road, but there's not a lot to like as far as winning games for this season if you're a Colts fan. So the Colts come in at 4th place. 3rd place, I think, is the Houston Texans. And I could go back and forth, and I really struggled with this a little bit because I think the Texans legitimately are going to be the Niners 2.0, DeMeco Ryans. There's a very good draft class, especially if they hit. And then going into next year, like I said, if they get those 5-6 wins, they still have a top 10 pick. They have a really good draft. They've got the Deshaun Watson picks. I know I keep bringing that up, but that's a very big factor. This roster is going to get really good, really fast, and much quicker than people expect. But this year, I think they are a 3rd place team. In 2nd place, I got the Jaguars. Now, I know Trevor Lawrence is supposed to be the greatest thing since, like, National Player of the Year, one of the greatest collegiate quarterbacks of all time, number 1 overall pick in the draft. And we all just assume, well, it was only bad his rookie year because Urban Meyer. I said in my preview, I think he is really good playing around in terms of the NFL. He was obviously great collegiately. He was obviously great in high school, but that doesn't matter when you're in the NFL because there's a bunch of guys who maybe not quite his resume, but have these absurd, great resumes that mean they're better than 99.9% of guys that have ever played the game in their specific state, or just people that are in the top 0.0% of guys playing the sport on the planet. But that doesn't matter when you're in the NFL because everybody's like that. So I think there is a really good chance they're going to fall victim to feeling a little too cocky or a little too much expectations. Like, I think they're walking into this season and it feels like, yeah, we should be the class of this division. Yeah, Tennessee is getting older and we got 2 rookie quarterbacks. Like, we should clearly be the team to win. But I think they finished 2nd. And that's because I think the best team in this division is the team that I think is going to get 10 wins, 11 max. But they are going to be the same team week in, week out. It's not going to be exciting. It's going to be really boring. It's Ryan Tannehill just making enough plays to win the game. Derrick Henry, as long as he's healthy, in my opinion, still the best running back in football if he's healthy and play all 17 games. The defense is going to be good, not great. The offensive line is going to be good, not great. It's just a bunch of good, not great, all across the board. Hopkins, I know we discussed the meme or the joke of Tennessee receivers, old receivers going to Tennessee, but I think Hopkins can still make an impact to make the passing game a little bit better, a little more explosive. But I think they're just going to be the most consistent team week 1 to week 17. So I have the Titans winning this division. Jaguars are alive for a wild card, though. Think about that. Moving on to the NFC South. In fourth place, it's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I don't know who's going to start the most games this season. Baker's obviously going to start week 1, but I don't know if Baker's going to end up with the most starts. I don't know if Kyle Trask is going to end up with the most starts. I don't know if an undrafted free agent quarterback is going to end up with the most starts. The Buccaneers are bad. They're really bad. They're clearly the worst team in this really bad division. The Buccaneers are fourth place. You don't want to hear any more about the Buccaneers, and I don't want to talk about them anymore. In third place, going with the Atlanta Falcons. Now, I think this is going to be a very close third and fourth place. Like, these teams are going to be between 1 to 3 wins, both of them. So this could interchange very easily. This is not like I definitively think the Falcons are better than the Bucs. I just have no faith left in Baker Mayfield, and I never had any faith in Kyle Trask. But the Falcons are absolutely a candidate to only win 1 or 2 games and be in that Caleb Williams sweepstakes. But neither of these teams are good. These are bottom 5 NFL teams this year. I feel bad because I know Desmond Ridder, like, this is his shot, but I don't see it personally. So Atlanta Falcons, third place. Second place, surprising, the Carolina Panthers. Now, I don't think this is a strong second place. I think this team finishes under 500. This is a Bryce Young season. You're going to find out, can Bryce Young play? And if Bryce Young is a high completion percentage, accurate, obviously it'd have to be accurate with the high completion percentage, and he just doesn't look overwhelmed, that's a win. The defense is going to be good. They're going to keep you in games, so that'll give him real scenario game reps. Like, he's going to be in games where he's got the chance going into the fourth quarter only down a score. He's going to have a chance to make a last-second drive. Like, he's going to be in a lot of real situations because his defense will keep him in games. But it's a very far second place as far as I'm concerned. I don't think they'll be over 500. I think this is a 6-7 win team max. But if Bryce Young can prove he can play, that's all they're looking for. Like I said, you start a rookie quarterback week 1. Your win-loss record is not what you're worried about that season. And so that means, number 1, the team that should win the division, the Saints. I don't think this is necessarily a super sexy pick or a super spectacular pick. I think this is just what we have left in the NFC South. Like I said, Derek Carr, Michael Thomas, Cam Jordan, Marshawn Lattimore, and the division's just terrible. Like, the division's just terrible. They could do it again where they only get an 8-win division winner, and I wouldn't be shocked. Should they that's it. That's all I could say about them. They should win the division. That is the nicest thing I can say about the Saints and the NFC South. So, with that being said, that means we only have one more day breaking down divisions, which obviously means the AFC and NFC North is tomorrow before we get to our playoff predictions and our seedings on Friday. And then we have a special episode dropping Saturday where Tony comes in and joins me, and he is going to come in and tell you why he thinks all my picks have been absolutely correct and how I just have a crystal ball and predicted the entire NFL season perfectly, clearly, because Tony and I have never disagreed on a topic before in our lives. With that being said, this is HardFoul Radio. This is the show that values time. I appreciate you for spending some time here with me today, and I will see you tomorrow.